Hello, my name is Case Roach, and today I'll be presenting on complexity and organizational change. I'll be using Netflix as the focus company. Netflix is a fascinating example because it's not just a tech company, it's a global innovator that has continually adapted to complexity. From its early days renting DVDs to its current role in shaping global media, Netflix has had to learn, pivot, and change rapidly in this complex environment. Through this presentation, I'll explore how adaptation and organizational learning have helped Netflix manage complexity, and also what lessons we can take from their approach. I chose Netflix because it represents a company that has consistently embraced innovation. Complexity theory is all about how organizations adapt and evolve in unpredictable, nonlinear systems. And Netflix does that exceptionally well. The two key themes we'll focus on today are adaptation and organizational learning. These aren't just buzzwords. They're the engines that power change in any complex environment. Our goal today is to connect these two themes to how Netflix not only responds to external shifts, but how they transform themselves internally to remain competitive. First, let's take a quick look at Netflix's background to understand its transformation. Founded in 1997 as a DVD rental company, Netflix moved to streaming in 2007, a decision that fundamentally changed the entertainment industry forever. Today, Netflix produces original content globally and has over 270 million subscribers. This scale introduces huge complexity. Different markets, cultural differences, content regulations, and tech infrastructure. Netflix's ability to navigate that complexity is what makes it such a compelling case study. Adaptation has been the core of Netflix's strategy the whole time. They've been able to respond to technological disruption, such as the shift to mobile and on-demand content. They also track consumer behavior with precision, predicting preferences before users even make a choice. The move to restrict password sharing and introduce ad-supported plans are great examples of this. These changes weren't just reactions. They were strategic adaptations to protect long-term sustainability. Netflix also adapted by entering international markets early on, adjusting content strategies for local tastes. Adaptation is active, not reactive. In complexity theory, organizations are seen as systems operating in consistently changing environments. Netflix thrives in complexity by treating change as a normal condition, not just a disruption. They've built a competitive advantage by being an adaptive system that senses shifts early on and responds quickly. Instead of trying to predict every variable, they build resilience through flexibility. This is the key. Complexity isn't something you eliminate. It's something you manage through agility. Adaptation drives readiness for change. Netflix empowers teams to innovate without waiting for top-down directives. They test ideas quickly, sometimes globally, and they iterate fast. Global content like Squid Game wasn't just a hit. It was the result of Netflix adapting to regional demand with a local production mindset. The introduction of ad-supported subscriptions shows how Netflix is willing to experiment with new business models to reach price-sensitive markets. These are all adaptive responses that will support long-term change. Adaptation is powerful, but without organizational learning, it's not sustainable. Netflix fosters a culture built on data-driven experimentation. One of the company's most talked about principles is its culture of freedom and responsibility. This gives employees room to make decisions while expecting accountability on the back end. Teams use feedback loops, retrospectives, and A/B testing, not just to learn what works, but to build organizational memory. That type of culture helps them stay nimble, even as they grow globally. Learning organizations are better equipped to handle complexity because they reduce uncertainty through insight. Netflix uses analytics not just to track success, but to understand their failure. Why a show didn't perform, why users stopped watching. They don't treat mistakes as setbacks, but as learning moments. This feedback-rich environment creates the capacity to act more intelligently in future decisions. In any complex system, learning is the best insurance policy against chaos. Organizational learning builds agility, and agility accelerates change. When employees are encouraged to take their own ownership, change becomes something they initiate, not resist. For example, Netflix often revives canceled shows based on data, a reflection of their ability to learn and adapt quickly. This builds internal trust and encourages a culture where change is viewed as an opportunity rather than a threat. In short, learning makes change more human and less disruptive. Netflix acts as a complex adaptive system, meaning they decentralize decisions while staying aligned to shared goals. Instead of rigid hierarchy, teams are empowered to experiment. This makes them faster and more resilient in the face of obscurity. By combining active experimentation with clear values and goals, Netflix reduces the burden of complexity. Their structure itself supports change, which is something a lot of traditional organizations struggle with. Looking into their past, Netflix made major shifts like transitioning to streaming, going global, and producing original content. Now looking ahead, they face new complexity. AI generated content, tighter regulation, and market saturation are to name a few. But Netflix's culture of learning and adaptability positions them to evolve yet again. Complexity isn't going away, so the question becomes, how prepared are they to keep evolving alongside it? Netflix shows that complexity can be a springboard if approached the right way. There are some big takeaways here for us. First, we learn that we need to embrace uncertainty rather than to avoid it. Complexity is normal, especially in a global digital economy. Second, we learn that we must encourage decentralized learning, empowering people closest to the problems to test solutions. Lastly, we learn that we need to build adaptive cultures that are also structured to change. Netflix didn't get everything right, but their willingness to change, that is the biggest lesson of all. To wrap up, Netflix is a powerful example of what happens when a company commits to both adaptation and learning. In complex systems, there's no final solution, just a continual process of learning and changing. Organizations that manage complexity best aren't necessarily the biggest or the richest. They're the ones that are the most adaptable. That's the challenge and the opportunity for all of us to learn. Here are the sources I used for this presentation, including Netflix's investor site, key articles on complexity, and course-aligned leadership resources. Thank you for your time.